The Mentalist was absolutely packed with some insane villains, and they were not all built the same. Some are gone in the blink of an eye, others made Patrick Jane look like a total amateur for years. Today I'm going over all 7 levels of villains in the Mentalist, starting with the least impressive kind out of all of them. Level 1. The copycat. A level 1 is the bottom of the list because these villains don't build anything of their own. They borrow. The whole plan runs on somebody else's reputation doing the scary part for them. And once you take that reputation away, there's nothing left underneath it. Their control stops at the edge of one room, one night, one story that only has to hold up until somebody looks at it properly. That's the problem, because in this show, the person who looks at it properly is always Patrick Jane. The guy who sets the floor here is Dr. Linus Wagner, and he shows up in the very first episode of the series, Season 1, Episode 1, the pilot. Wagner's a psychiatrist, so he's not some panicking amateur who got in over his head. He kills Dr. Gregory Tannen and a woman named Allison Randolph, and then he does the one thing that lands him on this list. He dresses the whole thing up to look like a Red John murder. On paper, that's not a bad idea. Red John is the biggest name in the state, so if your murder looks like his murder, every cop in California spends their time hunting a ghost instead of hunting you. Wagner isn't trying to beat the police. He's handing them a better suspect than himself, using a man he's never met. And it works on everybody except one person. Jane looks at the scene and can tell almost right away that whoever made it wasn't Red John, and it has nothing to do with fingerprints or timing.
Stoked to finally see one in the flesh. This isn't Red John. Right.
Red John's crime scenes come from a specific head, and this one came from someone copying the outside of it without understanding any of the inside. Wagner painted the symbol. He just couldn't fake the person behind it. The other thing that makes Wagner the perfect level 1 is how he gets caught. He walks into that case as the helpful professional, the expert assisting with the investigation, standing in the room while they work. And instead of that giving him an advantage, it just puts him closer to the one man he should have stayed away from. The whole time he thinks proximity is protection, and it's the opposite. Wagner does come back later and look at how. Rachel Bowman kidnaps Jane, and Wagner spends that whole story sitting in a prison cell. He recognizes the fake name she'd been using because she wrote to him after reading his work, and he hands Lisbon that lead in exchange for a shot at clemency. So he's still in the story, and he's still only worth anything because of what somebody else is doing. That's the ceiling on this level. You can be smart, educated, and dangerous, and still be nothing more than a guy standing in the shadow of a bigger name. Wagner's whole plan came apart the second one person looked at him closely. Level 2 is where that stops working, because the next guy on this list didn't fake a crime scene. He faked himself. Level 2, the one nobody looks at twice. Level 2 is for villains whose disguise isn't a piece of evidence, it's their entire personality. Nothing at the crime scene needs to be staged because the staging happened years earlier, in how everybody around them decided to see them. That takes way more patience than faking one murder. You have to be that person every single day in front of people who like you, and you have to keep being that person even while you're killing. The reason this beats level 1 is simple. Nobody looks for a suspect they've already decided is harmless. The guy who owns this level is Tommy Olds, and he's in Season 1, Episode 9, an episode called Flame Red. Tommy's a handyman. He fixes stuff around the community, he's a friend of a woman named Maddie Garcia, and everyone treats him as gentle and a bit slow. He's not somebody you'd ever put in the same sentence as a murder. Then he kills Rich Garcia. And the thing that makes Tommy so much stronger than Wagner is that he doesn't need a story afterwards. Wagner had to build a whole fake Red John scene to point the cops somewhere else. Tommy doesn't have to point anywhere because nobody's pointing at him in the first place. His alibi is his face. Every person in that town would tell you Tommy couldn't have done it, and they'd mean it, and they'd be wrong. It also isn't a one-time thing. Once the killing starts, Tommy keeps going after people connected to the old fire, including Ben Machado and Trey Pillar. He's working through a list while everyone around him keeps treating him like he needs help crossing the street. Jane beats him, but look at how. There's no clever trap and no lab result. Jane just refuses to accept the thing that everybody else in that town already agreed on. The whole community had signed off on who Tommy was, and Jane treated that agreement as the suspicious part instead of the settled part. And when Jane lets Tommy know he can see through it, Tommy stops performing. The gentle version of him just switches off, and what's underneath has been paying attention the whole time.
Tommy's an act, a performance.
That you never turn off.
Here's the part that matters for the rest of this list, and I want you to hang on to it because it comes back at the very top. The most dangerous disguise in this entire show isn't a mask or a fake name. It's being someone people have already decided not to worry about. Tommy Olds is one episode in season 1 and he's mostly forgotten, but he's running the exact same play the final villain runs for 6 seasons. Tommy only had to fool people who already liked him. Level 3 is a completely different problem because the next villain could read a room as well as Jane could. Level 3, the one who reads, "You back." Level 3 is where villains stop hiding from you and start working on you. These are the ones who figure out what you want, hand it to you, and then let you do the dangerous part on their behalf. There's no muscle involved and no money either, just one person who's lonely enough or proud enough to be useful. And this is the level where the results change, because everything under this got shut down inside one episode. From here on, the villains start getting away with things. Erica Flynn is the clearest example of it, and she starts in Season 3, Episode 19, Every Rose Has Its Thorn. Erica runs a matchmaking business, which is honestly perfect. Her actual job is sitting across from strangers, working out what's missing in their life, and selling it back to them. She murders her husband, John Flynn, and the way she does it tells you everything about this level. She doesn't do it alone. She uses a man named Peter Claridge, who's in love with her, and that love is the whole weapon. She doesn't have to threaten him or pay him. He wants to be the guy who helps her. Erica just has to be careful about how much she gives him and when.
You know how I feel about you, darling. Peter. Peter!
Wagner needed a famous killer to hide behind, and Tommy needed a town full of people who felt sorry for him. Erica only needs one person with a soft spot. Jane proves she did it, and that should be the end of her. Except it isn't, because she walks out of court with a voluntary manslaughter conviction instead of murder, and that's the first crack in this list. She got caught and she still won something. Then it gets worse. Later, in Season 4, she gets let out to help the team on another case, and she uses the entire operation as her way out. The cooperation was the escape plan. Everybody in that room thought they were using her, and she was the one setting the terms the whole time. And she keeps going. Seasons later, she turns up living overseas, tangled up with a man named John Nemec, and Jane and Lisbon end up working alongside her again on something much bigger than a dead husband. She does get put back in custody at the end of that, but count it up. Erica beat the courts, beat a CBI operation, and kept resurfacing in Season 3, Season 4, and Season 7 without ever needing a gun or a dollar. The only muscle she ever needed was one man who was in love with her. The thing that makes her fun to watch is that she isn't scared of Jane. She likes him, specifically because he's the only one who sees what she's doing, and being seen is more interesting to her than being safe. Jane, for all his talk, isn't completely immune to it either. That's why Lisbon can't stand her. She isn't just annoyed at a criminal, she's watching someone work on Jane with Jane's own toolkit. A lot of fans read Erica as Jane's dark side walking around in a nice dress, and honestly, that reading holds up. Same skills, same enjoyment of the performance, and the only difference is where they point it. That's an opinion rather than something the show states, but it's why she sticks in people's heads more than most one-off killers. Erica got inside people's heads, and she still ended up in handcuffs at the end of it. The next level is where that stops happening, because the man at level 4 never got arrested for anything he did. He got beaten by something Jane had absolutely no business doing. Level 4, the one you can't arrest. Level 4 is where the villain stops being a puzzle and starts being a wall. These are the ones who are so careful, so organized, and so patient. that knowing they did it and proving they did it turn into two completely separate problems. You can sit across the table from them, be certain, and still have nothing you can walk into a courtroom.
And you're certain that it's him? We found pictures of young women in his home. Two of them.
And this is the point where the list stops being about how clever the villain is and starts being about what the good guys have to give up to stop them. James Panzer is the San Joaquin killer, and he shows up in Season 4, Episode 7, an episode called Blinking Red Light. Panzer's public life is the part that gets you. He's on television as an expert, talking about the San Joaquin killer's murders, discussing the victims, playing the concerned guy who studies this stuff. He's commenting on his own work in front of a camera and getting treated like a professional for it. Let me be really clear about something, because people get this wrong. The show is not being coy about whether Panzer is the killer. Jane knows, the team knows, and the only problem is that there's nothing to charge him with. This isn't a mystery that stays open, it's a man who did it and cannot be touched. The moment Jane locks in is when he sees how Panzer lives. Everything in that private space is controlled, exact, organized past the point of normal. A lot of viewers point at that scene as the moment Jane stops investigating and starts planning. And I think that's right, because Jane's whole face changes. He isn't looking for proof anymore. He's looking for a way around ever needing any. And what he finds is Panzer's ego. Panzer treats Jane like a peer, another expert, someone worth showing off in front of. So Jane starts working that. He gets Panzer onto television talking about Red John, and Panzer, who cannot help himself, uses that airtime to call Red John a lesser killer than the San Joaquin killer. He belittles him on camera, in front of the whole state.
He allowed himself to be caught and killed by you just proves my point.
Red John kills him for it. Sit with what actually happened there, because it's one of the biggest moments in the entire show. Jane ended the San Joaquin killer without a warrant, a trial, or a single piece of evidence. He picked up one murderer and threw him at another one. And in the same move, he learned something he desperately needed to know, which is that Red John was still alive and still paying attention. Two problems solved with one television appearance, and one of the solutions was a man's death. The show doesn't let Jane skate on it either. The investigation into Panzer's death circles back on him later that season, and the pressure lands exactly where it should because he did do it. Not with his hands, but he did it. This is still the biggest fight in the fan base outside of the ending. One side says Panzer was going to keep killing forever and there was no legal way to stop him, so Jane made the only call available. The other side says Jane knowingly set up a murder and enjoyed how clean it was. Both arguments are all over the show's subreddit, and neither one is going anywhere because both are true at once. Panzer stayed free because one man was that disciplined about it. But discipline only protects you as long as nobody with real money decides to bury you. Level 5 is where the villain stops being one person and starts being an entire operation. Level 5. The one who owns the room. Level 5 is for villains who never have to be anywhere near the crime. They have staff, they have lawyers, and they have people inside the building where you work. Being guilty stops mattering, because the price of touching them is higher than anyone above you is willing to pay. And the cop chasing them has to decide how much of their own career they're ready to set on fire over it.
He's a very powerful man. Agent.
Level 4 beat the evidence, Level 5 beats the whole building. Tommy Volker is a rich, connected businessman and a major employer, and his story runs across 3 Season 5 episodes. It kicks off in Season 5, Episode 7, If It Bleeds, It Leads, when Lisbon links him to the murder of a reporter named Cassandra Flood and to a massacre in an Amazon village. That's not one bad night, that's a man with bodies on 2 continents who's currently shaking hands at fundraisers. And here's the moment that defines this whole level. Volker's secretary, Amanda Shaw, agrees to help Lisbon. She's the way in, the one person willing to say what she knows. Volker has her killed. He doesn't do it himself, obviously. That's the entire point of this tier. He's a phone call and a checkbook away from every single thing that happens, and the people who actually pull triggers for him have never met him in a room with a witness. Panzer had to do his own work and stay perfect while doing it. Volker just has to sign things. The middle stretch of this arc is honestly rough to watch because it's Lisbon slamming into wall after wall. Judges, bosses, influence, all of it pointing the wrong direction. She knows exactly what he did, and she cannot move an inch. And Volker is doing this thing the whole time, where he threatens her without ever saying anything you could write on a charge sheet. He stays polite and calm and talks like a guy who's already read the last page of the case file. Then there's Brenda Shetrick, who's feeding him information from inside the CBI. The show suggests she isn't happy about it, which somehow makes it worse. That's not some criminal empire recruiting a mole. It's a normal person in a normal office getting squeezed until she leaks. And it proves the CBI already had holes in it that had nothing to do with any conspiracy.
What is it?
Please don't make me do this.
What finally ends him is that he goes after a child witness. Jane helps get the kid out, and Lisbon puts the cuffs on him herself. Plenty of fans think the ending of that arc came too fast for how big the buildup was, and that's a fair complaint. But look at what Lisbon actually pulled off. She got the arrest, she bent rules to do it, and she still put him in handcuffs instead of putting him in the ground. That contrast is the whole reason Volker sits at level 5, because his story is Lisbon's version of Red John. She got obsessed, she let it eat her, and she started breaking the same kinds of rules Jane breaks. But she came out the other side with Volker alive and in custody instead of dead, which is something Jane never manages at the top of this list. There's even a decent chunk of fans who think Volker would have made a better Red John than the actual reveal, purely because the money and the menace were already there. Volker went after Lisbon because she was standing in his way, and the second she stopped being in his way, he'd have moved on and forgotten her name. The next level doesn't work like that at all. Level 6 is about a villain with no business left with these people, no money to protect, and nothing to gain, who comes after them anyway. And he doesn't come for them at work. Level 6, the one who comes for you at home. Level 6 is for the ones whose entire life turns into an answer for what was done to them. There's no payday at the end of it, and no empire to protect. The crimes here aren't about getting away with anything, they're about making specific people suffer in a specific order. And the reason this level sits so high is that this villain already has your name, your address, your family, and every old case file with your signature on it. You investigated him once, now he's had years to investigate you back. Richard Heibosch is the one who gets this level, and he comes into the show as an amateur photographer the CBI takes a hard look at during the San Joaquin killer case. He's a deeply unsettling suspect. There are allegations around him involving kids that the show never fully lays out, and I'm not going to pretend to know more than the show gives us. What matters here is what he was during that investigation, which was a man the team decided was worth watching, and who turned out not to be their killer. Then, Season 6 happens to him. Robert Kirkland grabs him while hunting for information about Jane's Red John list, and tortures him. Cuts off his thumb.
My thumb was cut off because of you! You people are the animals!
Sit down, Mr. Heibach.
This is not the CBI doing it, but it's happening because of the world the CBI built around this case, and Heibach ends that experience as a man who's been suspected, watched, dragged through it publicly, and then mutilated in a basement over a list he had nothing to do with. After the CBI falls apart, he and his sister Hazel start hunting the people who used to work there, and that shift is what makes Level 6 so much scarier than Level 5. These aren't agents anymore, so there's no badge, no team, no building with security. Osvaldo Ardiles and JJ LaRoche both die connected to this campaign, and the old team is being watched without knowing it. Rigsby and Van Pelt have a life now, they have a kid, they're regular people, and someone is sitting outside taking photographs. It all lands in Season 6, Episode 15, White as the Driven Snow, when Van Pelt is taken. That's the whole point of this level in one move. Volker killed a secretary because she was a problem in a file. Heibach takes Van Pelt because taking her hurts Rigsby, and hurting Rigsby is the actual product. There's no other goal. Hazel is the reason any of it works, by the way, and that's the smartest part of the plan. Everyone's looking at Richard, and everyone always has. So the sister moves freely the entire time, and by the time anyone works out there are two of them, the trap's already closed. Rigsby ends up shooting Richard dead to stop it, and Hazel gets arrested. There's a real argument in the fan base over whether the CBI built this guy themselves. He was suspected of murders he didn't commit, put under a spotlight, and then tortured. And only after all of that did he start killing. Other fans push back hard and say a man who kidnaps a mother and murders 2 people doesn't get graded on a curve for having a bad few years. The show gives you the facts of what happened to him and lets you fight about the rest, and people are still fighting about it. But the reason Hybach ranks above everyone we've talked about is the size of it. Rachel Bowman had already come back for Jane personally, years earlier, over what he did to her father. Hybach takes that idea and turns it into a campaign, working through a whole list of former CBI people at home, on his own time, using their own history as the map. He knew these people. He knew exactly what had been done to him, and he rebuilt his entire life around paying it back, and even then, it only took 1 season to finish him. So now take all 6 of these levels, every single thing we've talked about, and put them inside one man. Because that's what's sitting at level 7. And it's the reason none of the last 6 really count on their own. Level 7, the one who was everywhere. The whole time. Level 7 isn't a villain who's better at one thing than everybody else, it's a villain who does all 6 of the things you just watched, at the same time, for 6 seasons, from inside the system that's supposed to be catching him. Every level on this list was a piece of him. The show handed you the pieces one at a time for years, and you didn't know that's what it was doing. Red John kills Patrick Jane's wife Angela and his daughter Charlotte because Jane went on television and insulted him.
I do not like to be slandered in the media, especially by a dirty money-grubbing fraud. If you were...
That's the engine for the entire series. Every case Jane works, every rule he breaks, every terrible decision he makes for 6 years traces back to one night he caused by being arrogant on camera. And here's the thing that still gets me. He was in the show already. Sheriff Thomas McAllister appears in Season 1, Episode 2, red hair and silver tape, standing right there, being a helpful small county sheriff 5 seasons before anybody suspects him of anything. He was on screen in Week 2. Now watch the levels stack up in him. He stages his crime scenes with a symbol on the wall, the same trick Wagner tried to copy in the pilot, except Red John built it and Wagner was just borrowing the paint. He hides behind an ordinary, harmless identity the way Tommy Olds hid behind being the sweet handyman, and he does it in uniform, wearing a badge, in a job where people call you sir and don't ask questions. He recruits people through emotion the way Erica did, except she needed one lonely man, and he collects followers by the dozen. He kills with the discipline Panzer had, with at least 41 murders credited to him, and plenty more done through other people's hands. And the show never really sorts out which ones he did himself. He's protected by an organization like Volker was, except Volker bought his protection and Red John sits at the top of the Blake Association, a whole network of dirty cops and government people covering for each other.
To him that I am the Blake Association.
Why'd you have to kill him?
And he runs a personal revenge campaign against investigators the way Habeck did, except Red John started his before the show even began, and he started it over a joke. The followers are what make him genuinely frightening. Rebecca Anderson is an ordinary CBI employee who kills members of Bosco's team, calmly, from inside the office, and she's usually the first name people bring up when they talk about which character in this show actually scared them. Craig O'Loughlin sits inside the team as a fiancé. Lorelai Martins gets handed to Jane on purpose, like a gift, because Red John understood that giving Jane a lead was a better way to control him than hiding one. And the words tiger, tiger tie the whole network together, so his people can find each other in a room without saying anything real out loud. Then, in Season 5, he sends Jane a list. Not a threat. A list, and it lines up with Jane's own 7 suspects. He wasn't just surviving the investigation at that point. He was reading it over Jane's shoulder. Season 6 turns into the endgame. 7 names, an explosion at Jane's old house, and McAllister faking his own death and walking away from it. Gail Bertram gets set up to look like the answer, and he's just another moving part in the machine. The show keeps showing you men in suites with power, and the actual answer is a county sheriff who's been polite to everyone this whole time. And then, Season 6, Episode 8, Red John, does the thing nobody expected. It takes the biggest monster in television and makes him small. Jane starts with a bird. McAllister is scared of birds, something Jane tested him on earlier that same season, and the most feared killer in the state flinches
Bird. Very clever.
at a pigeon like anybody would. That flinch is the whole opening, because Jane had already hidden a gun under a church pew, and while McAllister is dealing with the bird, Jane gets to it and shoots him. And even that doesn't end it. McAllister still gets out of that church, and Jane has to run him down and strangle him with his hands while he begs. There's no grand speech and no supernatural exit. The man who ran a network of murderers corrupted an entire agency and destroyed one family so completely that the survivor built his whole adult life around finding him, dies out of breath with a pair of hands around his throat, sorry, and scared, and completely ordinary. Half the fan base calls that the best possible ending because the whole show was about Jane refusing to treat this guy as a legend. The other half thinks 6 seasons of build-up earned something bigger than a scared man begging for his life. That argument has been running for over a decade, and it's never getting settled. But that's exactly why he's level 7, and not just the biggest name on a list. Wagner borrowed his symbol. Tommy Olds borrowed his disguise. Erica borrowed his charm. Panzer borrowed his discipline. Volker borrowed his protection. And Heibach borrowed his hunger to go after the people who came looking. Every single one of them was Red John with one piece missing. The show spent 6 seasons showing you Red John before it ever showed you his face. Tell me who you'd put at level 7 instead, and hit subscribe